The historical record of late antiquity and the Middle Ages presents a glaring paradox. Read the primary sources, and you will find a single group present in nearly every major theater of Eurasian conflict. Yet read a modern textbook, and they're treated as a marginal footnote. These are the Alans. This map shows their extreme footprint, identified as the Asud in Mongol China, the Aesir in Iceland, and Alani in 5th century Spain. Traditional history obscured this. Scholars failed to track their Eastern nameshifts and blindly accepted Roman tropes of the primitive nomad out west. By synthesizing linguistic tracking with a rigorous forensic reassessment of late antique chronicles, we can dismantle the myth of the doomed barbarian horde and trace what actually happened. The geographic origin point for this investigation lies here, in the Pontic Steppe and northern Caucasus. To find them outside these mountains, we must stop looking for a rigid 19th century concept of a racial monolith. We need to look for a highly adaptable socio-military identity. Following Khazar domination in the steppe, observers stopped consistently applying the term Alans. Instead, they adopted a different root identifier. The root Alan diverges into names like As, Ossi, and Ossi. In Eastern Europe, Rus chronicles identify them as the Jossi. Moving east, they take the Mongol suffix ud, appearing in Yuan records as the Asud. The scale of this eastern presence is staggering. Chinese Oriental chronicles record an elite retinue of roughly 30,000 Alan horsemen serving under Kublai Khan, with their wider community likely reaching 100,000 people. This vast documented migration of the As name gives historians a serious framework for Snorri Sturluson's Old Norse texts. His framing of the Aesir originating Asnem from the east aligns closely with the geographic realities of the Alan diaspora. In late antiquity and the early medieval period, ethnic identity was fluid. A group's name was often tied to military utility and social prestige, meaning an identifier could encompass a diverse retinue of followers. This continuous overlap across Eurasia proves these names are not random coincidences. The As complex served as a living military identifier, carried by a resilient people thousands of miles from their origin. We see a similarly distorted history looking west, to the Alans who breached the freezing Rhine frontier in the winter of 406 CE. The standard historiographical assumption relies entirely on the Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus, who wrote decades earlier that the Alans were pure pastoral nomads who lived exclusively in wagons. There is a severe geographical limit to that lifestyle in Western Europe. The Hungarian Alfold is the only significant steppe available to sustain large herds. This map visualizes the economic constraint. Dennis Senor calculated the Alfold's maximum carrying capacity could support herds of roughly 50,000 nomads. But the massive crossing coalition of Vandals, Sueves, and Alans vastly exceeded the environmental capacity of this steppe. A purely nomadic economy was physically impossible. To survive the migration and subsequent settlement in Western Europe, the Alans had to undergo rapid and significant agricultural sedentarization. The primitive nomad is a Roman ethnographic fiction. The group that eventually crossed the Pyrenees into Hispania was already a socially and economically adapting force. By the year 409, the Alans had moved into Hispania, where they acquired the massive, wealthy Roman provinces of Lusitania and Carthaginiensis. For decades, historians followed the argument of E.A. Thompson, who claimed the Alans were simply too primitive and too few in number to rationally govern such a vast territory. This chart breaks down Thompson's methodology. He estimated 30,000 Alans in 411 by extrapolating backward from Vandal migrations in 429. But the math contains severe gaps. Contemporary writers warned that those Vandal figures were deliberately inflated to deceive Roman authorities. When we ignore academic guesswork and look at the physical archaeology of the Alan-controlled provinces, we find no evidence of immediate economic collapse. High-value Roman currency, like the gold solidus, remained in wide circulation under Alan control. Everyday commerce continued uninterrupted. Lower-tier bronze coinage circulated steadily, and the export of massive commercial goods maintained previous volumes. The Alan kingdom was a functioning, monetized political entity. They were fully capable of managing the infrastructure within their borders. This raises a critical question. If the Alan kingdom in Hispania was economically sound and possessed vast territory, why was it completely destroyed by the year 418? The Chronicle of Hydadeus provides the primary forensic text to investigate the military collapse. The political landscape required proxy warfare. The Visigoths, led by King Wallia, invaded Hispania acting directly on behalf of the Roman imperial name. Hydadeus locks in the chronological starting point for the conflict. He records a total solar eclipse on July 19th in the year 418. This map reconstructs the campaign. First, Wallia's Visigoths strike south, systematically destroying the Silling Vandals in Baetica. Then, Wallia executes an abrupt pivot. Before the remaining factions react, he marches into Lusitania, crushing the Alans and killing their king Attic. Wallia weaponized unity of command. By defeating a fractured alliance in detail, he eliminated the Vandals and the Alans before they could merge their armies into a single defensive force. The fall of the Alans in Hispania was not due to an inherent weakness in their state. They were outmaneuvered by brilliant Gothic military strategy. The immediate aftermath of 418 reveals their true resilience. Hydadeus notes that the Alan kingdom's name was abolished, but the population was not erased. The survivors systematically subjugated themselves to Gunderic, king of the Hasding Vandals. This survival tactic connects directly to the ethnonym evidence we see in the East. Just as Alan survivors integrated into the Vandal power structure to maintain utility in Europe, their eastern cousins integrated into the Mongol power structure as the elite Asud. To understand a reality of the late antique and early medieval world, historians have to discard the lazy tropes of doomed primitives. Whether in the courts of Mongol China or the battlefields of Roman Spain, the Alans were the ultimate socio-military adapters of their era.